Well, we have certainly seen an energy crisis in Europe playing out even before the threat that Russia might turn off the taps in response to a conflict with Ukraine. We've seen lower Russian energy supplies into Europe. That's contributed to the tightness in the markets and the high prices. But we should remember there's a lot more going on in the European energy crisis. Even if Russian gas continues to flow, even if it turns out the worst fears are not realized, we have a situation in the European energy markets where they're depending more on spot prices, more on needing to fill inventory seasonally. This is not a one-off event. This is going to play out in the next several years. We're going to have to make sure that their energy reforms to liberalize their market are complemented by the tools they need to smooth volatility. Nobody likes volatility, least of all to support more strong climate action.
What about prices right now in the oil patch? Because obviously over $90 a barrel, it's a topic we've been harping on over the last several days, including with energy ministers in Cairo. What are your thoughts there? What is the reaction? Is it the reaction to the potential invasion? Is it reaction to underinvestment? What's happening?
Markets are really tight. People are worried about the recovery, supply lagging. We're seeing last year an amount of investment in oil and gas that is roughly consistent where it should be if we were on track to meet the climate goals of net zero by 2050. The problem is we're nowhere close to being on track for net zero by 2050. Oil use is going up, gas use is going up, so we're underinvesting, and we have the threat of some hit to supply if there's some conflict around the world. So we're not on track for our climate goals, but investment is not keeping up with the fact that we're not on track for clean energy or oil and gas.
Oil over 100. Do you see that happening?
Certainly possible. I mean, we're in a really tight market situation now. There are different views how quickly shale is going to respond, whether Iranian supply is going to come back to the market, and of course uncertainty about demand because of the pandemic or potential conflict and the sanctions response. But all the fundamentals now are suggesting that oil prices are going to continue to go up. That's not good politically, it's not good economically, and there are relatively few tools that policymakers have to do something about that. The U.S. has already released the SPR once, and OPEC has limits to how much they can put on the supply, especially before spare capacity gets so low that the markets get nervous about that. There's no buffer in case something goes wrong.
When I was speaking to Suhail al-Masroui just a couple of days in Cairo, I said, if President Putin decides to invade Ukraine, does OPEC Plus, as an organization, have a plan to deal with that? Do you think that they're getting it right when it comes to navigating this market?
Well, I think first of all, what's been interesting about OPEC over the last couple of years is that cooperation between Saudi Arabia and Russia in a leadership role. I think it's hard to see that continuing if Russia takes the sort of hostile action toward Ukraine that it's threatening to take. OPEC's been bringing additional supply back to the market. That's helped to cushion prices. They're planning to continue doing that, according to Prince Abdulaziz and OPEC's leadership. But there's a limit to how much they can do. I mean, many countries are not meeting their OPEC quotas because they can't. There's only a few countries in OPEC that can really put more supply in the market right now.
And how much pressure does that put on the Biden administration, in your view, to work with oil and gas producers in the United States to fill that gap?
Well, I think they're facing and worried about gasoline prices, certainly. You can see that with gimmicks like some Democrats calling for a gas tax holiday, running up to a midterm election that's going to be pretty rough. High oil prices are not good for the economy. They're not good politically. There are just rather few tools they have to do something about that. They're engaging and talking with people in the oil patch. You saw Secretary Granholm talk to the National Petroleum Council and say, get your rig count up not long ago. I think there are relatively few policy tools they could actually take to affect U.S. production in the near term. Most of that's driven by market forces.
Do you think that that's going to inevitably hurt the transition, in your view, in the United States specifically?
So one of the things I'm most worried about now, as someone who leads at Energy Institute and also the Columbia Climate School, is we can't price spike and underinvest our way to a clean energy transition. It has to be an orderly transition. A disorderly transition is not acceptable economically or geopolitically, but it's also not acceptable with voters. I mean, they want to, in order to maintain support for strong climate action, you need to make sure that energy affordability, reliability, and security of supply don't come into tension with climate ambition. Because if you do, climate ambition is going to lose.
And that's what's happening right now.
I think we're at risk of that happening now if we don't take stronger measures to bring together the tools that are needed to take stronger climate action, but also recognize we have to make sure we're adequately managing oil markets and gas markets today. And if we have a messy transition in this jagged path to clean energy, we're going to lose public support for the kind of actions we need to take to accelerate decarbonization.